Well, hello, everyone. I am so excited to have another wonderful conversation with a good friend, Sheryl Sarmento in Florida. She used to live in Hawaii here, so we first got to know each other when she lived here in the state of Hawaii. But she is an amazing woman of God. She's a grief counselor. She knows a lot about sex addiction and so much more. And today, because this is Mental Health Awareness Month, I thought it would be just so great to have Sheryl on again and talk about how important it is to really care about emotional health. With Explicit Movement, we cover topics as sex abuse and those kind of traumas, as well as pornography and sex trafficking and LGBT issues and just so much more. Healthy dating, and in all of those areas there is that piece, right, of emotional health that we want to see, people walking in, that can help, really help, have victory in all these areas. And so, Sheryl, welcome. Thank you so much for coming in. Yeah, so we'll just start. Cheryl's going to share a little bit more. Sheryl, can you share a little bit about yourself and your testimony?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for having me on again, Michelle. I always look forward to these times, and I love what you're doing in your ministry, and I'm keeping up with it all the way from Florida and watching some of your videos and topics, and it's wonderful. And I feel very privileged to share today a topic, well, a couple of topics, but the one that is on my heart so strongly right now that affects mental health more than we ever knew is the topic of grief. And so just a little bit about me and why I got into the topic of grief is that years ago, I had a rough childhood. I got into some drugs and drinking and things that I shouldn't have. And then eventually I met Jesus and I became a Christian. And so all of that stuff was no longer a desire for me, no longer in my life, thankfully. And that led me to want to help others after I had overcome this. And so I went to college and I actually got a certification in addiction counseling. And during my course, it was a very intense course in a Christian college, I had to also, at the same time as all the testing and everything, go through the practicum part. So the practicum part was in a rehab, and I was watching people come to this rehab. A lot of them were believers that were recycling, had already been there and coming back and been there and coming back. And so that just put a big question mark in my mind of what is happening? Why is this? Why are people not overcoming? And so at that time, I went into deep prayer and fasting, and Lord, we need some answers here. This is pretty serious, And the answer that came back for me was grief. My people don't know how to biblically grieve. And to be honest with you, Michelle, I didn't even know there was such a thing as biblical grief. I had heard of grief, and I knew that it was a strong emotion evoked by loss, provoked by loss of some sort, it could be losses in life or death, a death of a loved one or a friend. But I didn't know really that much about it. And that's when I started to delve into the Bible and see that there was beautiful principles that I had never heard of in the Bible related to grief that helps people to emotionally heal. And the thing I also learned is that when we don't know how to grieve properly, we might not heal. And so that's when people start to numb their feelings out. It can be drinking and drugging. It can be sexual addiction. It can be eating our feelings down. It can be all kinds of things that we start to do in order to not feel that pain of unresolved grief that leads to all kinds of other things. So that's how I got into this topic, and I've been passionate about it ever since. And that was in the mid 90s. About 96, I did my first grief conference. And so I've been trying to spread the word ever since.
That's amazing. And you know, grief, it can, of course, be oftentimes related to the loss of a loved one, right? When someone passes. But all kinds of grief, right?
Yes.
Doesn't only have to be about a death that you've experienced with someone you care about, but it could be a loss of a job. It could be a loss of a dream. It could be a loss of just of something that you were looking forward to and you never got it, or just a loss in general, right? Could you talk
loss in general?
That?
Yes. Yes, and I had a list at my conference of some of those that you already mentioned, and it's true that all of those things, divorce is a huge one, and so that can cause loss of house, money, status, friendships, and a lot of people, when they get a divorce, they lose the same friends that they had together. So that's like a death of dreams. That's a big loss. And all of these things that you mentioned, loss of job, loss of a pet. I go into the need to grieve a pet because a pet often is like a child. It becomes a part of the family. And so a lot of people don't give themselves permission to truly grieve their pet, because it's not something that's kind of okay in society, just like pretty much any kind of real deep grief is not okay in our society. So those things are a big long list of losses. Loss of a limb, if you need to grieve, like if some people have lost an arm, or lost their vision, or lost their ability to drive, and are no longer, those are all things that cause grief. And grief does not usually just go away. So now we're finding keys and tools in the Bible, whether it's a death or even a loss in life. Believe it or not, I was so surprised to find the Bible addresses both.
Wow. Well, that's amazing. That is amazing. I want to just add one more thing to the list, because I think we might have some pastors listening. My husband was a senior pastor for 23 years. And as a pastor, people come and people go, because of various reasons, right? And, we call ourselves a family. We love people deeply. So whenever people left, even if it was for the best of reasons, we went. My husband, being a man, he kind of stuffed it a while, because he wanted to move on, right? And just release and bless them. But for me, I took it harder because I really missed them, and it was lost. So every time someone did leave our fellowship, even though I knew I would see them again, it was just that loss of being part of our church family, but the grief did come up with him later, as he realized he didn't deal with that, the sadness.
Oh, yeah. That's a great point.
Later. But it just, just in life, right? The moving.
Yeah.
And you go on.
Yeah, no, that's a good one, Michelle. Any loss of any kind of relationships, like what you said, for any reason, even if it's a good reason, it's still a loss, and it still needs to be grieved. And the Lord clearly led me to leave my mother and come to Florida. And that was a huge loss, because I didn't think I'd have to ever leave her again, and I had to grieve that loss. And when her birthday comes around, I have to grieve that loss that we're not together, and, those landmark type of things. But you also brought up something else that I'm actually looking into currently to learn more about, which is men grieving. Because even though at the conference we teach I teach that Jesus wept. Real men do cry. And I have all sorts of biblical examples of men grieving, wailing, weeping, crying. In our culture, it's a lot harder to do that, because back then it was normal and expected. It was normal. In fact, one of the examples is when Jesus was weeping over Lazarus, who he was going to raise from the dead, and he knew a good outcome. He wept anyway, right?
Mhm.
And then the Jews around said, "Oh, look how he loved him because he was weeping." And so that was even a sign of true love when you wept for somebody.
Oh, okay. Can I just throw in a short story that illustrates that? So,
Yes, please.
after my husband, years and years and years of pastoring, he did a sermon one time, and it was unexpected what happened with him. He was up there and he realized that because of all the loss in his life, because people came in, over 100 people in
Wow.
the life of our church had come and gone over the period of 20-something years.
Wow.
And he realized that he unconsciously had put a little guard on his heart, because he was always thinking in the back of his mind, maybe don't get too close, they're going to leave. Somehow that lie can kind of come in, right? And so he didn't realize he had that wall, but God showed him, even though he's still a loving pastor to everyone, but they're in his self, and in the middle of his sermon, it hit him and he started to weep.
Wow.
He healed over and he was shaking and weeping. And I was in the front row thinking, oh Lord, what do I do? Because this is in front of everybody, right? And a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
So I went up. I just thought, okay, Lord, help me. So I just went up to the microphone and I said, I don't know what I said, but I just kind of facilitated that moment. And I said, let's just all pray for Pastor Rob right now, and then the elders kind of came up, the board members, and we just laid hands and the church just prayed for Rob. And it was a beautiful, powerful moment. Everyone was crying, because we all didn't realize, the grief that maybe we all didn't take time to go through. And so anyway, here he was, my husband, just weeping and weeping.
That's a good example. Yeah, that's sad, but good that it came out, and in that story, it actually can give other people permission to grieve. And, honestly, Michelle, that should not be not okay. It should be okay. Because see, our society has made tears bad, has made it like people who you'll hear on a newscast, oh, did you see so-and-so? They were really strong. They didn't shed a tear. And suddenly strength is equated with not crying, and so we have it all backwards in our culture, in the Western culture, especially. When Queen Elizabeth died, you could just tell that people needed to burst out and cry. But oh no, you had to keep that stiff upper lip and go through it and try not to shed a tear. And that is completely counterproductive to emotional and mental health. Completely counterproductive. God made us to cry, and not only to cry. In the Bible, they would hire wailers to wail out loud. These women that would come and get the tears going. It was that important.
Wow.
To help provoke and give people permission to start the wailing. And do you know that's making a comeback? Professional wailers you can hire them now. It's making a comeback because people are starting to realize how important that really is.
Wow. That's so interesting, because when you hear people wailing, it kind of just helps you to kind of start getting in touch with your pain and
Yes.
releasing it, right?
Yes, that's what it's designed to do. That's why it was in the Bible. And Jesus said, call for the wailing women. Yes, it's part
Wow.
of the
Wow.
protocol of grief.
Can you just take a short moment here to talk about funerals? Because
Mhm.
I still go to Christian funerals, and now that since I've learned this, I have a different take or perspective. I mean, we do a lot of times funerals are now called celebration of life. So it's
Yeah.
supposed to be a happy occasion. We really don't want crying, or that kind of is communicated. This is a happy occasion. Let's celebrate, that now they're
Mhm.
going on to the Lord. And there is that truth that
Mhm.
there's that comfort there, and we know that.
Mhm.
But 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 I just sometimes there's no mention of, if you want to cry, cry, like
Yeah.
even to give that permission. So sometimes
Right.
I'm a little conflicted, because
Yes.
I really want to cry, but it's a
Yes.
celebration of life, and so no one's crying,
Yes.
or hardly
Yes.
any.
Yes. This is another reason I'm passionate about this, because that is counterproductive. It is not the way God designed us to be. We're
Mm,
not supposed to be celebrating life at the death,
mm,
and so the Bible throughout what happened. Okay, so let's just take, for example, Jacob. Jacob thought his son was torn to pieces,
mm,
and he began to weep and wail. Another thing, another tradition. See, the Jews have lots of traditions straight out of the Bible, because what's inside is supposed to be manifested outside.
mm,
Otherwise, it becomes toxic inside.
mm,
So, from the very onset, like of any information at all about a tragedy, a death, a loss, the first thing they do is tear their clothing away from their heart,
mm.
to
Oh,
expose their heart and to show they have a broken, torn up heart. So
wow.
that's the first thing they do. And then that usually releases the tears at the same time, because
Mm,
there's like like a yell or a scream or a wail, and
mm,
then a tearing away. And in fact, in Jewish funerals now, they will do that. They will still either tear their own clothing, cut it, or they will wear a ribbon that you can tear. And
wow.
so, yeah, they don't skip any of this outward manifestation of what's going on inwardly. And so,
Mm,
the celebrations of life, I don't know how we started getting into that. But we need to go backwards to the beginning and the way that God designed grief in
mm,
order to heal. So I actually just coached someone in Hawaii through a death, and I was able to help that person from day one of the death and for the whole 30 days. And
wow.
what she said afterwards is, she said, I would have never gotten through this or known what to do. I would have done the wrong things, and I would have allowed others to do the wrong things or say the wrong things to me if I hadn't had coaching every day through this tragedy, you
Oh,
know.
wow.
And yeah, yeah. And I decided after, I've done that twice now, and I've decided this is a huge need. Why? Because you can't think straight. You're in shock and trauma. And so these funerals that you mentioned, God brought me a spiritual daughter here to do these conferences with, which is an answered prayer. And we agreed we want a grief revolution.
Oh
We
my
want
gosh.
to teach
Can you say that again? A grief revolution.
revolution. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Because
I,
proper biblical grief can revolutionize your life.
oh my goodness. This is revelation, or a truth being restored, maybe,
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. So even funerals, we just did 2 conferences almost back to back, just got done with it this weekend. and taught people how to do a biblical funeral instead
Oh,
of these celebration of lives that are well-meaning but also harmful to us, you know.
wow. Are you able to, I know that's probably very much involved, but could you give
Mhm.
us a snapshot, just a
Sure.
general overview of what is a biblical funeral?
Okay, well, the first thing that is supposed to happen in the Bible, the person was buried 24 within 24 hours after death. Now,
Okay.
that's not likely to happen in America. But for example, this person that just went through this had to wait for 3 weeks, and she said it was torment, that it would have been so much better to get the funeral done right away.
Early.
Because yes, because in a biblical funeral, you would, first of all, a lot of times loved ones, if they're able to be there with the person when they're passing, you know, that's even better. That's closure to the body. And that's what Mary and others were doing at the grave. They were having closure, bringing the spices and everything for Jesus, and so you took care of that body, and then before it was buried. And then another thing you would do at a biblical funeral is you would allow tears. You would encourage tears. You
Mhm.
would not stop tears. I heard of a horrible example of someone who was crying at their husband's wedding, and the pastor said, "Stop."
Oh, you mean the husband's funeral?
Oh, what did I say?
The husband's wedding?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
husband's funeral.
Husband's funeral. And the pastor told her to stop because this is a celebration of life. So
Oh,
that was, can you imagine that? Can you imagine? So we need to encourage the opposite. We need to, you know, even if you had a little write-up or something that said, you
wow.
know, God made us to cry, you will see tears, let them fall, let people be where they are if they feel like crying, you know. And I've even had certain music and pictures, and I've done funerals for others, and pictures that would help them to cry, you know, pictures of the loved one, and encouraging people, don't try to stop what God has made you to do, which is cry. So, and then right after the funeral, oh, did you have a question?
No, no, no. I'm just tracking with you.
Okay.
So good.
Okay. So in the Bible and in Jewish tradition, there's a quote. Let me see if I can find it really quick. There's a quote that we quote at the conference, and it's by Jonathan Horowitz. I'm not seeing it right now, but basically it says that he believes that if people did the Jewish traditions of grief, which are from the Bible, it could heal the world. It could heal the world.
That is
And
profound.
because it's from, yes, it is. And it's from the Bible. It's not just because it's Jewish, it's because it's created from God. God's the one that created grief. He's the first one mentioned to grieve when he made mankind, and he had to bring out Noah, you know, and his family, and let the rest die, you know, through the flood. And it says his heart grieved.
Wow.
He grieved that he had made mankind and that he had to give them a consequence. So he's the first one mentioned to grieve. And so another part of the Jewish tradition, and it's in the Bible as well, starting in Genesis, is the 7-day period after the funeral, which is why you want to have the funeral as fast as possible. It's called sitting Shiva. Shiva means 7. So for 7 days, the first 7 days after that funeral, if people can capture that time and really use it for their emotional and mental health to intentionally grieve right then and there, then they are going to be far better off later on. We're made to grieve immediately after the death. We're after the funeral, you know.
Wow.
And
So 7 days, like maybe it would be good to even take off from work and invest that time to just
yes,
breathe.
yes, yes. I encourage people to do that. Now, the tradition that's very very helpful is people will just stay in their home and let the other people bring over meals or help them go ahead and shop for them, or if they have a pet, to help take care of the pet or walk the pet or whatever, so that that person can actually focus on their grief. And also I teach that the things I've learned that you say and you don't say. Now, that's a big thing that's happening in Christian circles, probably worse than any, because we want to give them hope of the future, eternity, and that sort of thing. But the things we say can actually often do more harm than good in a person's grief. It can actually make their grief worse. And I've heard lots of stories about this. And I experienced some myself, but knowing what to say, that's really what I'm passionate about in teaching believers, because we often will say the things that we think are going to help, but they don't, and so, yeah. So during that 7 days, people come and go, but what is encouraged in the Jewish way is to not say anything. Let the mourner initiate if they want to. Don't go hug the person. Hugging the person without their permission or without their asking can actually stop their tears.
Wow.
And it's the opposite of what we naturally do, right? It's the complete opposite. But I've had people testify to me, I didn't want so-and-so to touch me. I didn't want them to put their arm around me. I felt stifled. I felt like I couldn't just focus on my grief and cry and let it all out, because I could feel their being uncomfortable and wanting to stop it and fix it and pat my back and so it's like we all do that, but we need to learn a different way if we want people to truly experience and heal from their grief. Wow. Yeah, I know.
It's like counterintuitive, counterculture, even what we've become.
It is. So, exactly that.
So not even saying anything, or if you were to say something, what would you say? Or what would be some examples maybe, or just
let me
sorry.
I think I have some written down here. The things not to say would be like, oh, they're in a better place.
Oh, yeah.
Or well, at least they're out of pain. That's a common one.
At least it kind of minimizes it when you say least.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a common thing for us to say in our culture. You'll get to see him again someday is another one that, and all of these things. But here's what it recommends in Jewish culture and even in the Bible, where we see examples of this. Weep with those that weep. Yes. Romans 12:15. If you can sit with the person, if they need to cry and you're able to sit with them and cry with them, or just be there while they're crying, that's a wonderful healing thing for them. Don't try to stop them from crying or feeling what they're feeling. Say as few words as possible. And then like maybe, I'm here for you. Let me know if there's anything I can do. Something as simple as that.
Just so let them know you're not alone. I'm here if you need me.
And that's the whole point. You're not alone. And and make sure that if you say, I'm going to be here for you, call me, or make sure you are. because a lot of people after the first 2 weeks fade away. And they stop checking on that person. So the Jewish in tradition, and when the temple stood, there was called a path of mourning. We actually had people take this path in the conference and go around. And I don't have the exact saying in front of me, but it's a very simple saying. And it's the only thing you're allowed to say, which is something like, may the God of comfort from Zion and Jerusalem comfort you. So ours might just be, may the God of all comfort comfort you in your time of grief. And that's it.
Wow.
That
Wow.
would be the whole thing, you
Wow.
know? Yeah.
It's making me think too. I mean, there's not. I'm gonna say that it's nothing wrong. It's, I guess people will have to be led by God in
Uh-huh.
when they plan a funeral. But what are your thoughts on having worship songs at a funeral? You know, where we sing worship songs like in church. You know, the church worship songs.
Yeah.
What do you?
Well,
Yeah, what do you
if a
think about that?
funeral's designed to help someone grieve,
Mm-hmm.
then pick the worship songs that help them grieve.
Ah, like be selective, right?
Yes, like I Can Only Imagine. That's a real
Right.
tearjerker.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a good one to yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Something,
That's a good
the
one.
ones that I use are like I Can Only Imagine. That is a real tearjerker, and it's a worship song and it's appropriate.
Yeah.
Amazing Grace almost
Oh,
every time gets people to be able to, and just, yeah, whatever, just to remember everything is not to celebrate, but to facilitate the grief, and the celebration's going on in heaven. You know
mm,
what I mean? And so here on earth, we're supposed to help the person who's lost someone,
yes.
and
Yes.
yeah, and be there for them. And they're not feeling like celebrating, even if they do it, you know, it's like a cultural thing we've been kind of boxed into and trained, and the sad thing is it just does harm. That's why I'm passionate about this. It's not to condemn us as Christians. We have good hearts to try to help people through this. And it's never a malintention that we say these things or do these things. But if
Mhm.
we really want people to heal, and especially as pastors, leaders, and, counselors and all those things, we really do need to embrace these principles that are in the Bible that are going to help people to heal so much faster, because otherwise they have delayed grief,
Oh,
and that can cause all kinds of other problems. And so if we can, right from the onset, help to learn to coach people through their grief from day one and help them. I help people put up boundaries. Like, well, what do you want to do today? It's day 2. How do you feel? Well, I don't want to be around anybody. Okay. Do you have someone that you've made an appointment with that you need to cancel? Yes, I think I do need to cancel so and so. And I said, well, whatever you need to do today to help you through this, I encourage you to do it, whatever it is. And then
wow.
maybe day 4 is, well, how are you feeling today? What feels best for you in your grief? Well, I want to be around somebody today. Okay. Is there someone that you can call that's safe for you, that won't say those things that you just don't want to hear right now, but they know that you just want to vent, and you can tell them, I just want to vent. I just want to talk about the death of my loved one today. And they'll say, yeah, I think there is so and so. I'm going to call them and make that appointment. And they do.
Wow.
So,
This is so good. I love this. It's so
oh,
practical. There are
yeah,
practical things we can all do. Yeah.
yeah. Thank you.
Wow. Wow. So, gosh, this is so helpful. And I know that in your research you've shared before where um, the Jewish culture, they have a lot less addictions and things like that is
Yes,
generally as a culture. And it's not, we believe, right? It's rooted to being able to release the grief. It's
yes,
dealt with rather than stuffed.
yes,
So that affects then, how the behaviors that explicit movement we care about, wanting to see people healed and have victory over certain things,
yes,
sexuality wise, addictions and whatnot. So
yes,
this is a key, right, to really
yeah,
in health and
definitely.
wellness.
Yes, definitely a huge key. And I'm just going to keep plodding away at it to learn and do more and more. And one thing I forgot to say about your husband is like, I want to find more ways that men feel comfortable to grieve in our society. They might not want to shed a bunch of tears at a funeral. And a guy actually came up to me and said something about that. He goes, I feel like maybe if I go out and take an axe and chop wood and scream, that might help me. And I, yay, that's a creative way to get it out. We need to find more ways, because a lot of times, especially for men, they're not yet comfortable with that.
Right. And, as pastors, if you're a pastor listening, like my husband's senior pastor for many 20 something years, 23 years. And so, when people come and people leave, you still have the ministry that you have to work on for the Sunday sermon that's coming up. And so,
Yeah.
his mold was, okay, well, bless them, let's move on. And so, because he has to move on. And so it was almost 2 decades of moving on that caught up with him, in that moment when he did that sermon, and God just released tears. And it was, I guess church family, but it was a public, in front of everyone. But thankfully we all, helped us all to grieve, I think, like you said.
Yes.
But had he grieved, throughout, maybe that wouldn't have built up, right? It wouldn't have built up.
That's a really great point. And that's the truth. It's like, what's not expressed and confessed. I say this, it's either going to implode and cause sicknesses or addictions or whatever, or it's going to explode. It's going to do one or the other eventually, especially over time. And for what happened to your husband, it's kind of like an explode. It's, it's like it all of a sudden overtook him. It just came out, bubbled over. He couldn't contain it. But grief is most likely going to do one of the two over time to all of us, which is, another reason we want to learn good grief so we can get healthy.
Yes, I'll tell you this one thing that a senior pastor told me once, from another church that was very, very well known, at one point in Hawaii, where I was grieving over a loss of, I think, someone leaving the church that I was really close to, and I was, I was going through a hard time, because it was a hard thing. And he happened to call the office and then he asked me how I was doing. And so I was sharing with him, and he said to me, well, Michelle, you just go back on Sunday and you just love the people, and if you need it, then just take medication. And that was what his advice was to me. And I knew in my heart that wasn't the track I wanted to go. But I thought to myself, I wonder if that's how he, deals with.
And that's how a lot of people do. Yes. Yes. That's exactly a great example of how a lot of people feel. They don't want to feel it. Just go take your antidepressants or have your glass of wine at night so you can, just numb it out. And these are all manifestations of unresolved grief, unresolved pain that needs to be dealt with. And so as believers, we need to learn how to not only do it for ourselves, but how to help others too. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's quite an example.
Yeah. And just the thought of crying whenever I was going through a hard time. And in those moments, my husband chose to cry with me or just allowed to, I felt better.
He did what the Bible said. Weep with those that weep.
I'll be crying, and most times he, and encourage me. That didn't help too much. But when those moments, there were a few times, in the past where I'm crying, and he starts to cry with me, and then all of a sudden, I feel so much better.
Yes, that's wonderful.
Amazing healing effect to have someone cry with you, because
it's so true. It's so true. I that's part of what we talked a testimony this weekend about the girl that I helped through crying. I cried with her. I wailed with her, and it released, and it was genuine. I heard her story, and
you hurt with her.
Yeah. And it's a miracle because part of my testimony is that I was never allowed to cry. I was told at even in a traumatic event at 4 years old, good little girls don't cry. So all
Oh,
my life, I spent time trying not to cry because I wanted to be a good little girl until maybe the last 10 years, you
oh,
know?
wow.
Yeah. So we talk
Cheryl.
about that too. Tapes in your head that you have, that was a lie in my head for so many years. And now I
Wow.
can cry, I can weep, and I can actually wail and weep with those that weep. That's a miracle, you
That
know?
is, that's a beautiful testimony of God's releasing and healing you. And I pray that people are encouraged by your testimony too.
Yeah.
Cheryl, gosh, I could talk all day. This is such a
Mhm.
good topic. Oh my goodness.
It-
It's really related to so much of our life in
yes.
health wise, right? And
Yes.
yes, let's have a grief revolution. I agree with you. I'll
Yeah.
support that. But I want to, if you have any final words before we talk about your book, because I want you to share about that. But any final words you want to say about grief?
I will keep you posted on some Zoom seminars that we are going to be doing on this topic.
Yeah.
And in fact, in November, I might be the 17th, but I'll confirm with you. We're going to have a grief through the holidays Zoom meeting.
Oh,
Yeah, how to get through grief in the holidays, over during the holidays.
oh, I love that. That can be a hard time for a lot of
Oh,
people.
terrible time. Yeah, for so many people. So that's the next thing on our list. So if I could just keep you posted, about the revolution that we have going on, that would be great.
Oh, yes, I would love to let our network know about that because even if they don't need it, they might know somebody who could use it. Is there a charge to it, or how do you register, or how does that work?
Yeah, I can't remember. I'm going to have to check, but I think it's going to be 10 or $15 for the whole thing.
Oh, that's really great. Okay, well, let me know because I want to let everyone know,
Okay.
the
Okay,
group.
I will. I
Yeah,
will.
yeah,
Yeah.
that could be a classic. And
Hmm.
wow, thank you. So,
Yeah.
anything else before we talk about your book?
No,
Because yeah,
that's
okay.
pretty much on that topic.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a good little beginning, introduction
Yeah.
to it, really. There's
Great.
so much more. But so Cheryl, tell us about your book that you came out with recently.
Okay. So, we talked about addictions
Mm.
and the lack of grief. And so when I became an addictions counselor, one of the I thought I was going to be mostly helping drug and alcohol addicts. And as it turned out, and we're talking 25, 30 years ago, it ended up being porn addicts mostly that were coming into my office for help.
Mhm.
Lots of people, and I only dealt with the Christian community. And so because non-Christians in general, they don't believe that that's a sin or that's a problem. And so Christians, male and female, were getting hooked on porn, and which leads to down a terrible road of all sorts of other things, and is even connected with the trafficking, as you know, and all
Mhm.
sorts of things. So what I also encountered was not only in my own life personally with my ex-husband. Sadly, he was one of them, hooked on into that, and in ministry, and leading that double life that often happens when you're in ministry and you have a hidden addiction. But I had lots of tools by then to cope with this, and it was horrible and traumatic, but I was noticing that because I had gone to school and a college and graduated and had a lot of things in my tool belt, that I was not only like learning how to get through that horrible time, but I was helping a lot of other women. And one thing I noticed, that a lot of the women or men, if their wives were hooked or having affairs or whatever, but it was at that time probably at least 70 to 75% or more men, then I was noticing that they were not getting help. They were not overcoming their the women were not overcoming their, their trauma. It was like adultery for them. And some of them were drinking, drugging, losing their relationship with the Lord, going out and having affairs because they felt worthless. They felt rejected, and they felt like even God did not love them, or he would not allow such a thing. That's what provoked me to write a book, a workbook, to help women not only to get tools to get through each stage that they go through, the death of dreams, the loss of love, the feeling insecure, and feeling like they're not good enough, and all the myriad of things that come out of their spouse being addicted to pornography. And it can be pornography addiction. It can be pornography that leads to other types of addiction, strip clubs and prostitution and stuff like that. And so, but even if it was, quote, what they say, just pornography, it was a devastating effect that caused most of those women to feel like their husband was cheating on them and that they had been rejected, excuse me, and that they didn't know how to cope with this. And this book is not about whether you stay or you go. It's about keeping your dignity in the midst of it all, not self-destructing, realizing the truth about who you are, regardless of what your husband does, and also getting them back to the Lord, the one who's never going to fail them or forsake them. And so that's, and I've had a lot of women go through the book and say they've gotten a lot of help, and it's helped them to journal things out, to discover what was in their heart, to realize there's nothing wrong with them, to learn about boundaries in the situation, that are necessary. Often if they don't have certain boundaries, they end up with sexual diseases, STDs, and that kind of thing. So that's basically what it's for, is to help those women. It's a workbook to help you heal from your husband's sexual addiction.
Wow. I'm going to really, let people know about that too. Where can they get this book?
So they can get it on Amazon, and I don't know, I'm just going to hold it up. This is what it looks like.
Oh,
and that's my pin name. So you got to make sure you put in my pin name in order to get it. It's on sale right now. It was $20. I think it's down to $15 today.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to let people know, have a link in the email blast that people can get that.
Yeah, I'll send that to you again. Yeah.
Can for the audio, can you just read out the title for me?
Yes.
It is
Pearls of the Heart, a workbook to help you heal from your husband's sexual addiction. And then my pen name is Sheryl Sarmento.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I also want to let you guys know that, Explicit Movement created Brave and Beautiful for Girls of Faith. And also the secular version is coming out too, the classic version. So Sheryl wrote a whole section on grief for women, for the teenage girls, that will help them through their grieving process. And that's just a beautiful, beautiful articles that she's written about tears as well. And women of all ages have also been buying Brave and Beautiful for themselves because it's helping them.
It's wonderful magazine. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
For the Christian version is for a journey of a 4-volume set of journey books.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're really excited to have, featured Sheryl and just this important, subject on grief. Mm-hmm. Wow. I'm so excited. Well, we all need to make sure that the resource, people know about that, Sheryl. Mm-hmm. And it's going to help so many people, so many women.
That's my hope.
Oh, so common, right? Mm-hmm. One of my therapist friends, she said that the number one reason for divorce in her practice is because of a pornography addiction.
Yeah, I believe it. It didn't used to be that way, but now, and I also have written things to help men in the situation, but I don't have it published. So that's another goal of mine. There are lots of books out there on my website and my ministry site, which I'll send to you, Michelle, is even these beautiful free resources for men in helping them overcome.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Can you share, just verbally share also the website?
Yes, that is deepwatersministries.org. So it's deep, deep water. Wait a minute, let me make sure. I had it up here a minute ago. Because if you don't spell it right, it's going to come out.
Deep water.
Yes. Yeah. So it's Deep Waters. It's all one word. Ministries, which is MINISTRIES.
Okay, so
.org.
water and ministries is plural. So
Correct.
Deep Waters Ministries.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, we want people to visit you for sure.
Yes, there's resources on there. I am set up for counseling now. And if they want to book an appointment, I've been booking appointments with people and doing lots of counseling on grief and sexual addiction and addictions. So,
okay, that's wonderful to know because, for explicit movement with sexual addictions and grief, and we're going to have people, and now we have youth we can refer people to you. So, so congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yeah. So they can get lots of help on that website. There's even an article. If you go into the more section, we have a section on what to say to someone who is grieving. And so we have a blog about that. So that's very helpful.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Sheryl. This has been such a rich conversation, and I know it's going to be a great blessing and a great introduction. And people got to know you and your resources. So, thank you so much. Would you mind just closing in a short, brief blessing over all of us who are listening?
Okay. Thank you, Lord. Thank you so much for this time. And we just pray it will help many, many people and heal the hearts that are grieving and those that need to overcome addictions. And we just thank you came to set the captives free. Bless Michelle and Explicit Ministries and everything she puts her hand to. We just thank you. We love you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Sheryl. God bless you.
You too. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. Okay.